Ex-prisoners, how does your experience in prison compare to how it is portrayed in the movies? It was a lot more boring. Very little excitement. Very little violence. Lots of wanking. Lots of reading. Noisy and full of morons. Both the people running it and the people living it. No sex that I saw. Lots of theft and posturing. Source: 4 years in med security in New York. I know someone that was in women's prison and there was no grape, but she was asked if she was gay for the stay. She was not, and it was respected. There was no salon. Haircuts were performed using nail clippers. She also said that there was so much drama that it was like being in high school again, but worse. Won't say what I did, but there is no grape. 6 seemed to be consensual. We didn't get cells, just a big room with bunk beds and overcrowded. I spent my first 3 weeks sleeping under somebody's bed. People are kind and genuinely interested in listening to you because they have nothing else better to do and are depressed. Yeah, everybody is depressed. Without doubt, you'll be constipated first 3 to 5 days. Nobody cares if you drop the soap. There is a lot of theft and people usually get away with it because you can't stay awake 24/7. Beating up the biggest guy there is just childish. I got in one fight and it was broken up before anything happened. Nobody claims to be innocent. For me, prison was just like boarding school without the classes. A friend of mine went to prison and he told me about his experience. Apparently the biggest feeling he got was being bored. There's very little to do there, so he ended up working out a ton and actually got a certificate for computer repair. I guess they had some kind of opportunity for education. This is in Canada, and he said that there was a pretty big racial divide. There were white people, black people and Aboriginal people. The black people and Aboriginal people got along pretty well, but the white people segregated themselves quite a bit. I reckon it's different depending on the jail itself. Another thing he mentioned was the noise. After he got out, he didn't really listen to music and always wanted to just chill. We played a lot of chess and sat quietly for the first few weeks. He said that there was so much yelling and nonsense in jail and you don't really get to escape that. He is a pretty big guy and apparently he got in one fight. He said that he didn't start it, but explained that if he had not fought then he would have been constantly harassed until he did. So he conceded and beat the shit out of the guy who started it. He didn't get caught and nobody bothered him after that. When he got out, he told me repeatedly that he would do anything to not go back and that if he ever went back, he would likely kill himself. Unfortunately he has FASD and started doing drugs again. Got caught DUI with drugs intended to sell. He's back there now and I have no idea how to get in touch with him. It's been a few years now and frankly I'm scared to know. Media gets a lot of procedural aspects of it right, but the atmosphere is decidedly less tense than Hollywood would have you believe. On Christmas morning one year I recall casually walking in the prison yard drinking a mocha and smoking a black and mild cigar. For example, conducting myself largely as I would at any holiday resort with medium security. I saw a dude stabbed to death over a lengthy phone call, but I also saw a bona fide prison wedding that was surreal beyond anything I've seen on film. Mostly though, it's boring as frick and a complete waste of time, money, and human potential. That part of it tends not to jump off the screen, so it's often omitted in artistic works. My brother is currently in prison. He did have one run-in with a gang that made him have one of his family members send money or they would hurt him, but other than that he has been doing well. Got a state certificate for carpentry and HVAC. Also has taken some college courses. It seems that he has been pretty well rehabilitated. He also said that he feels no shame anymore. He said he will probably come home and just shoot with the door open with no friction. So I was a co for Corrections Canada at maximum security facilities in Ontario, but I worked at all levels. I have a different perspective than the community population, but I'll give her a stab. Maximum security prisons are generally filled with people who belong there. They require special handling, are prone to violence and often very good at manipulation. Consequently, we try to have as professional a working relationship with them as possible. Swiping a baton over the doors and screaming "get up" frika doesn't happen. There is very little prison grape as there are more than enough willing volunteers. Gangs, you're not forced to join a gang. But many do. In Canada, the Native Brotherhood, Aryans, Mafia, Russians, Asian are all present. We're starting to see Manuscript 13 and Cert 13, a specific prison set of the Mexican Mafia. In most cases, gang activity is fairly obvious, and for that reason, planned attacks are usually foiled. Violence is random. A guy knocking into another guy and not saying sorry, rival gang members getting into a squabble, someone fricked someone over food from the canteen, etc. When there is planned violence, it requires a very strict procedure and we usually have to investigate heavily, tossing cells, interviewing gang members, etc. In Canada, if you have a release date, are a non-violent or reformed offender and aren't pulling life/in administrative segregation though, some people in AdsegD get them, you can get what Corrections Canada calls PFV or private family visits, trailer, linens, kitchenette. Usually, families would bring food and feed, spend 2 days together. You could smell the cooking. Married people do what married people do, I guess. We randomly inspect if we think something is up. But we're pretty good at leaving you alone if you are trustworthy. The biggest myth. Prisons aren't chaotic and the prisoners don't run the show. When prisoners say that they can cause a lockdown to plan attacks, what do you think we think is going on? Why do you then have your cell tossed? Because we can see you. We're not stupid. Causing an alarm is the easiest way to have people, especially from rival gangs, turn on you and give us information. They don't want to be locked down. They want out. Couple days ago I discovered the After Prison show. A guy does YouTube and tells stories from when he was locked up 7 years or so. It's brilliant. I already commented briefly, but would like to expand. I spent 3 years in the federal prison system in the United States as a 20-year-old white college-educated female with no prior history with law enforcement. Though my crime was drug-related and non-violent, it was technically classified as a violent crime, so I was placed in a medium security facility where I was exposed to far more high-level drug dealers, murderers, and terrorists. As a pre-trial federal inmate I also spent over a year at various New England county jails, so I got a pretty broad survey of the system in both the Northeast and the Deep South. I got to fly Con Air a few times as well. The thing that affected me most deeply was what I learned about people. While many of the inmates were people society had basically dismissed as human garbage, I would say 90% were good people who were placed in poor circumstances and made poor choices. I believe in personal responsibility. However, I gained a great deal of compassion for the women I ended up knowing who had been thrown away for years, their kids growing up without them, because they got involved with drugs or a bad boyfriend. Most of them had experienced a lot of trauma in their lives and just didn't have the resources to cope in a more pro-social way. Though women are often catty, in general people respected and supported each other. I very rarely felt unsafe, even as the anomaly that I was. I stood up for myself, but in one instance, where I was being harassed and threatened, the old heads in my unit, long-term respected inmates, intervened on my behalf without my asking. My first night in prison I was terrified until a bunch of people came to ask me if I needed anything, a snack, some sweats to borrow, hygiene products. The worst people in many cases were the guards. Most were just people trying to do their jobs, but for many an environment of complete power with limited if any oversight brought out some seriously sadistic behavior. The actions I saw and experienced from correctional staff will stay with me forever. Imagine a situation where you can be strip searched because the officer feels like it. They make you spread your ass cheeks and squat for them. I saw them get bored and harass a mentally challenged woman until she reacted so that they could strip her, pepper spray her, and beat her. Because they were bored. I could go on for a while. But in general, prison is a microcosm of the world, and I saw the best and worst of human nature in my time there. It's nothing like people think. Boring, boring, boring. Every day just like the last. There were fights, but they weren't what you see in 3 movies. Don't disrespect people inside, and you won't get beaten up outside. I was in minimum security federal prison. I was convicted of possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine. It went federal because we crossed some state lines and had imported a ridiculous amount of meth into the state. It was my fiance that was selling. I only got charged because I went to one controlled buy with him. They had nothing else on me. Prison was far less scary than everyone tells you. The worst part is a petty bullshit. It's juvenile arguments and things that would never matter on the outside are a big deal inside. The best example I have is I almost got into a fist fight over a dryer. The beach kept opening it to see if my clothes were dry. They weren't, and it was taking longer because she kept opening it. It's that kind of shoot that gets old. The weirdest thing to me was that almost all of the women had prison moms. It was an older woman that would look out for their daughter. My bunkmate was 50 and had a mom that was 65. I was 19 and didn't have one, which was mind-blowing for some of the other WOM. I didn't need anyone while I was there. I was on my own and that's how it stayed. I had a few friends, but for the most part one kept to myself. The guards were mostly men, so that caused problems. There were a bunch of guards getting favors from the girls. Not really surprising, I guess. It always seemed to be consensual, and usually a tit-for-tat kind of arrangement. We did have one person come into the prison that was physically female, but he identified as a man. He had incredibly small tits, and I'm almost certain he'd started hormone treatments. The girls fought over him. There was a bunch of gay for the stay going on. I never participated because frankly, no one there was my type. MB, so it wouldn't have been a big deal. But I also went in there with the mindset of doing my time and never looking back. My daughter was 4 months old when I left her at the front gates with my parents. I was not going to get attached to someone inside and have that kind of heartbreak when I got out. I was solely focused on getting out, staying clean, and making a better life for her. I've been sober for 12 years now. Feel free to ask any questions. I'll answer pretty much anything. Here in Brazil we are currently experiencing a big crisis in the prisonal system. There are riots happening in prisons across the country every day. Rival groups inside the prisons have declared war against each other, and there's been hundreds of deaths already, mostly by decapitation. Lots of prisoners have escaped as well. It's been hell. The prisonal system in Brazil is really fricked up. All prisons are hugely overcrowded. The cells are in the worst condition possible. People are just thrown there like garbage. Just yesterday I saw on the news a prison where there's no prison bars in the cells for quite some time now. It reminds me of that Zona from Prison Break. And the majority of the population couldn't care less and actually wishes these people were gone. When I read in this post that being in some prisons in the US is just boring, I think I was actually, in a way, happy for you. It's really sad. I was in a minimum restricted prison and it was not bad at all. It was 2 levels above the lowest security, nothing I imagined like the maximum. I mean, we had our own rooms with doors we had keys to, private showers and toilets, could order tea, vs etc. There were fights occasionally, but they weren't bad. Imagine a dorm with a lot of older, mostly undesirable, mostly uneducated men with big egos and a curfew. The prison I was at had a medium and maximum prison on the same grounds, and it kept everyone in line pretty much. People were scared to go to the High-Side Experience Sterling Correctional Facility, Sterling, Colorado, 2015-16. I'm a prison officer in a UK prison. Thing that surprised me was lack of grape, and that the prisoners get a penguin the chocolate, not animal every day. Never been a prisoner, but did have interesting visits while working as a plumber's helper putting in boilers. First prison was a male prison, built in the early 1900s. The inmates there had to work the fields and farm a large percentage of the food supply. Believe it or not, the food was pretty good, especially the pizza. The trustees that worked the boiler room were pretty cool folks, but we did have them apparently steal some copper pipe from us, which was a clusterfuck, because everything in the van had to be accounted for on the way out. One of them made the mistake of opening a steam valve he thought was off though, and ended up getting his arm blasted with steam, peeling a huge layer of his skin off instantly. Pretty gnarly injury. The other was a women's prison, medical unit. The food at this one was freaking awful. Hot water to drink, because they had no ice, and hot turkey salad filled with gristle and bone. IDK how they eat that shoot, I couldn't. The guard that was assigned to accompany us told us on our way in that the inmates would make sexual advances at us, but if he saw us even say hi to them, he would throw us out. And went on to say, even if you did manage to sleep with one somehow, this is a medical unit, so your deck would probably fall off a few days later. It was an interesting experience, certainly showed me that I sure as shoot never wanna end up locked in there though. Went to juvie, got to watch movies and the food was pretty good. Found out that rumors sometimes get smaller through word of mouth, and had sports outside every day, so it was kinda fun. Friend of mine went to juvie, Jesus, about 13 years ago now. Similar story, good food, few movies, sports outside as an option, but there was also a indoor gym. He wasn't fat when he went in, but he came out ripped. Not to mention he learned a bunch of new trick. First 48 hours he was out, roughly 15 years old, so we had the option to do some of our lessons in college instead of school. He was up at his college lecture, and during lunch he went and stole an approximate $500 in cash. He left cards, wallets, purses etc. in the coats he took this cash from. He then proceeded to town, bought a brand new wallet, took it to the playing field, threw it in the mud and battered it. He took a few random cards for people's services like painters, and put those cards in said wallet. He then put 400 something in the wallet in this trick, took that wallet to the police station and handed it, saying he found it. Just a FYI, in the UK, if you hand something in, and it isn't claimed, you get to keep it after X amount of days. So essentially he handed in a wallet no one was looking for, with an amount of cash no one was looking for, as the college money they knew to total around 500. The best thing about it? He was telling the whole class about this conquest and a group of girls went straight to the headmaster. Funny enough, 13 years later, we both started the same university, in the same year. Not me, but what my older sister told me. She said if she cried her cellmates told her to stop, so she wasn't marked weak by the other prisoners. I was in Texas State Prison for 2 years. It was definitely not as bad as the movies portrayed. Bad stuff happens, just not as common as movies portrayed. The whole 2 years, there was only one grape. The fighting is common, but mostly organized, to not have riots break out. It's not easy to get as much stuff in and out nowadays. I've thought about doing an AMLOL crazy shoot, but not as bad as the movies for sure. I could go on all day about things. I was in a medium security facility, higher security due to everyone being either murderers / sex offenders / huge drug dealers. Probably the most simplistic I can make this post. I was a jailer and worked in the sheriff's office for a while. I worked maximum security most of the time. Everyone was pretty relaxed. However, there would be days where you could tell they winded up and tensions rose. 90 of the time they were in their dorm just lazing around. They had 2 showers in the dorm, no communal showers at our prison. Food wasn't served in cafeteria like you see in school. We had 2 trustees bring huge carts with 140 Aisha trays, and we slid the tray through a mail slot in the door to the dorm after they showed me their ID badge. There was once or twice there was grape we heard through the speakers of the dorm, but the grappists were put in isolation cells and charged by the victim. Fights once or twice per shift. We normally just fussed at them and had a write-up where they lost telephones for a week or lost visitation. No recreation time in closed cement court with 2 basketball hoops, no workout equipment. Everyone was normally nice to me because I treated them like humans and I never had too much of a problem, even though they were maximum security inmates. For me it was 2 years in a mid/Mac. If you kept to yourself it was like a cheap no-frills hotel with a few drawbacks. Counts in the middle of the night, shooty food, schoolyard bullies, absolutely inept management. In a lot of ways it was easier than real life. No bills. Cold and worry about life outside. It was before the internet was widely available inside so limited communication. Nothing like the movies 99% of the time. Rape was never an issue, but you really could find yourself fighting in the blink of an eye. From the couple of times I was in county, very short term, just a couple of days, until I was bailed out. It depends on where you are. When I was in on a misdemeanor charge PM 2, it was easygoing and very relaxed. All you do is sit around and talk to the other guys in there, mostly for just stupid stuff. No one in there is who I would call a criminal. However, when I was in county for felony charges distribution of a controlled substance, I was moving like an ounce of weed a month to close friends, so I wouldn't pay to smoke. I felt like many movies are close to spot on, aside from the fact that there were many more people in there that were meth heads. Probably like 1/5 inmates were currently on meth and scared me. Overall it was just boring. Nothing happened when I was in there. However, I heard from others that occasionally there were small events like people bowing up for a fight, though not much ever came of it.